Well, hey there, I'm Isaiah Payne with the Spokane Home Builders Association here with Dr. Sean Smitham. Really part 3 of a 3-part conversation we're having. So if you've missed part 1 or part 2, go find that. However you found this video, you can find part 1 and 2. Really would encourage you to go see that. In part 1, we talked about just the season that we're in, the year that we're in, and what that means, and how to look for different signs of how we might not have the stability, safety, predictability in our lives that we really need to have a well-balanced mental health. And then in session 2, we talked about really just the 3 different sort of places and environments that we might be in our home environment, our work environment, or our third place, whatever that kind of other escape is, and really focusing on that workplace. What does it look like for employers or employees to have meaningful conversations about mental health? That's what we're hoping that we're having with you. And so you might be there, sitting there thinking, why am I watching this? I've heard this all before, or I don't really need this. This doesn't apply to me. I imagine, Sean, you've heard that before from individuals. And so really, what is it that people need to focus on? Why do people say, man, I've heard this all before? Yeah. And really, what's the next step for us to be moving this conversation forward?
So that question, why do people say that? That's a human characteristic. So it's not, we like to feel like we've got the answers. We don't like to, as human beings, feel vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is we're always vulnerable. And so the more that we can just acknowledge that, yeah, I'm struggling with this, or yeah, I'm feeling this way. Now, if you're sitting out there and you're thinking you've heard it all before, you have. And the reason you've heard it all before is because these are the things that work. These are the strategies that work. It's our own human delusion, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else to feel like somehow I'm special, or that somehow my circumstances are different, and therefore these things won't work. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for us to get over. And the easiest way to get over is just do it. Just do the work and focus on just the next step. So one of the concrete things that I like to help my clients use right away is this idea that there's only 3 types of business in the world. Your business, someone else's business, and God's business. Your business is limited strictly to your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That's it. Other people's business is their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. That's it. God's business is everything else. If we're feeling overwhelmed, it's likely a signal that we're outside of our business. We're trying to do too much. Mm-hmm. And so that overwhelmed feeling of depression is a very real phenomenon. And the solution is both simple but not easy. Right. And the solution is to focus just on the next thing. So if I'm working with somebody, their sleep is disrupted, their meal schedule is disrupted, they're not getting out and getting active, or they're not being social, we've got 4 levers that we can start to work with. Pick one, or I'll help them pick one. And then we're just going to focus on changing one of those things. And then we'll start to change the other things. And so the hardest part is to just do these things. Now, if you feel like you can't just do those things, that's where we reach out and we need our community. So we can reach out to a friend or a family member, and we can have someone be our accountability partner for one of those 4 levers. If you don't have anybody in your life like that, or if it's not safe for you to be vulnerable like that and ask for help, then that's when I think you reach out to a counselor or a therapist to help you understand what you're thinking, understand what you're feeling, and give you some guidance about what the next step is.
Yeah. So to go along with that, there's probably a temptation. I know I would probably feel it. I want to fix everything all at once and then be all better, so I don't have to keep talking to you, right?
Right.
Like that's the thought and the delusion that I can just fix it all.
Well, that's a great example because I imagine in your field you hear this all the time. So they say, I want my house to look like this.
Sure.
And you're looking at it thinking, well, first of all, we need to do some structural things. We need to do some wiring. Plumbing needs to be fixed. Like there's some other things that need to happen before we get you this house, right? Mm-hmm. And people that are highly driven in your field, there's full of people that are highly driven, motivated, very talented, used to being able to get things done.
Make it happen.
The hardest part is to help them understand that just doing the next thing is the way that you get out of this. It's almost like hiking through a swamp. And the only way out is through. So you just have to keep moving. Just have to keep moving to the next step and the next step and the next step. And eventually you get out of the swamp. But if you try to get out too quickly, you'll just tire yourself out and you end up being stuck longer.
Yeah. No, I like that. An analogy that someone here, as we were talking earlier, so it's kind of like a gym membership, right? If you don't use it, what good is it? You can't go, man, having that gym membership wasn't, I guess, the right thing because I don't look any different. Well, you didn't even go, right?
That's right.
Take that next step to show up, I think is what I hear you saying. What are, let's just take one of those, like sleep. If I'm sitting here and I think this is maybe something, especially in our season right now, people are feeling a lot. Sleep's disrupted, schedules are probably different, kids are at home more. And so, man, my sleep is just all over the place. I don't even know where to start. What's a good kind of practical, tangible, next kind of small, because I think you're saying a small, incremental, manageable step.
There's a great book called Atomic Habits. If you haven't checked it out, it's great. And it talks about the science of behavior change. And it talks about just those one little things and how those amplify over time. So sleep is one of those examples. The best thing you can do for sleep is actually set a wake-up time that you're going to keep the same no matter what. So I wake up at 5:30 every day. Doesn't matter if it's Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I wake up at the same time every day. It's counterintuitive, but when you wake up at the same time every day, your circadian rhythm starts to set so that you go to bed at a time that will allow you to stay rested when you wake up consistently like that. So that would be the first thing for sleep, for example. For diet, try to have a consistent meal schedule. If you can't have consistent times for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then have consistent times for as many of those as you can. So maybe it's just dinner, but dinner's going to happen at the same time every day. The other really good thing to look for in diet changes is high protein. Start to focus on getting protein. Your body is built of protein, including your neurotransmitters that are going through your head. Depression has us reach for all the carbohydrates and starches and sugary foods and alcohol, which is only going to amplify your depressive symptoms. So if you want to make a change, dial in a meal time, but then also start to focus on getting good quality proteins at each and every meal.
So you're talking about carbs and sugar, and all I'm thinking about is the Christmas season that's right now. And so, so part of what you're saying too is that one thing affects another, right?
That's right.
Some of what I'm taking in can affect then how I'm feeling, right? Yep. So what are maybe some other things like that? Like, oh man, I need to be aware that thing. And I think for a lot of us, we go like, oh yeah, substances, and those are really bad things. We're not going to do that. What are some other things that people might not really think affect them as much as they might assume?
Yeah, so the sleep thing, the diet thing, the carbohydrates, alcohol. So a lot of people will set themselves up for failure. So they'll either try to change alcohol consumption, say, and they don't want to drink over the holidays. Well, if that's part of your traditions, that's part of your habits, it's going to be hard for you to quit cold turkey. So instead, allow yourself to have an alcoholic beverage, but then you're going to drink a glass of water in between each of those beverages. It's a small little behavior change, but it's going to change the way that you're ingesting that alcohol. It's going to set you up for success. Exercise, same sort of thing. People will say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go drive to the gym at 5:30 in the morning. And then the first time they don't do it, then I'm a terrible, rotten, no good person. So instead, just say, I'm going to be active for the first 10 minutes when I wake up. So maybe that's just walking around your house. And you can give yourself credit for that. So I was walking around my house, and then maybe it's just walking around the block. And then maybe you will find yourself in a month or two thinking, I really want to go to the gym. But it starts with just the little changes.
Yeah, so setting goals that are manageable, attainable is really key. And it's not, weak or doing less. It's actually doing something that's going to incrementally build, right?
Yep. And then the other thing you want to watch for is probably happening right now to some of our viewers is I've already heard this before, which we just addressed. But that thing, that organ inside your head that tells you, I already know this, true. Yes, you already know it. And now you need to do something with it. Now you have to keep moving forward with it. When you need to go look for help is when you try to do it yourself and you just can't. You can't make those small changes, or you make those small changes but you can't stick with them. Then at that time, it's probably appropriate to reach out and get some professional help. Or at that time, it might be appropriate for you to go ask your doctor for a prescription for antidepressants, because that might be enough that allows you to get moving. But antidepressants themselves are not going to take the place of making some of these changes.
Yeah, I think that's really good. One of the questions I think I wanted to ask, and maybe you just already answered it, but how do I know, I think we talked about like, man, how do I know that I have something going on? Some of that self-assessment, we talked about that in the first session and some here. And then really, how do I know that I need to go talk to a professional?
Yeah.
Right? Like what's your best advice there? How do I once I'm evaluating myself and I'm having some conversations, evaluate my environment, and it still just doesn't quite make sense? How do I know that I need to take that next step?
So I think the first place you look for is when your behaviors are not in line with your values in terms of, I want to be a very loving spouse or a very loving father, but I notice that I'm on edge with them. Okay, that's probably a pretty good sign that maybe after you try to adjust these other things, if you're still finding yourself irritable with them, if you're still finding yourself not being able to be present with them, then that's probably a sign that you need some extra help, whether that's talking to your doctor about an antidepressant or going to a counselor to talk about those things. The other big thing is, for human beings, it's not uncommon for us to think about death and dying. It's not uncommon for us to think, gosh, things would be a lot better if I was just dead. But if it gets to the point where I start to really think about how would I do it, and I start to really lay groundwork planning that's a sign that you need to go talk to somebody. And that's a sign that probably sooner versus later to talk to someone about that.
Yeah, so talking to somebody, I know you're someone who they can reach out to, especially if they're watching this video. Hopefully they feel comfortable doing that. I know too, we have some resources, some information, some phone numbers. If you feel comfortable texting or calling someone, what are some of those resources, some steps that somebody could take?
Yep. So the easy one for people that like to text is you could text 741-741. That is a text hotline. A licensed counselor is available 24/7, and they'll interact with you via text and help you with your next steps. For those that want to talk to someone on the phone, you can call the national hotline, which is 1-800-273-8255, or you can call a regional number here in the Spokane region, which is 877-266-1818. And then it's always appropriate for you to call 911. If you're not feeling safe, if you feel like you might be tempted to harm yourself, it's appropriate for you to call 911 if you can't remember these other numbers.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Sean, so much for spending this time with us, really having this conversation. And really, that's what we hope, that this starts a conversation. We know that as we talked about, it's not as simple as snapping your fingers and everything's solved. But we really want to have conversations about how do we view mental health, how do we deal with that in different environments, at the workplace, at home, and really what does it look like to be open to those conversations. We hope that's what you've taken away, at least that. Thanks so much for watching these 3 sessions. If you missed one of the early ones, go back and check it out. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to comment. Thanks so much for watching.